Evanego. I manage the Bureau of Mobile Sources here at DEP. I welcome back those of you that joined us last week for our first webinar, which was an introduction to electric school buses. Today we will discuss the details of the electric school bus grant program solicitation. You'll learn about what's eligible, the funding, our bidirectional charging pilot, and you'll also learn how to apply. We're very excited about the bidirectional charging pilot. This will allow us to evaluate technology that will allow electric school buses to use bidirectional capabilities to send power back to the building, which will alleviate peak demands on those hot summer days. So please join us next week, February 14th, as we conclude the webinar series when we discuss the bidirectional pilot in greater detail. I'm going to go through a couple logistics before we get started. So I have muted everyone. Please hold all your questions to the end of the presentation. Once we reach the Q&A session, please raise your virtual hand, and you do that by going to the top of your monitor. You'll see a hand with the word raise underneath it, and you just click it, and then I will call people in the order that I see. If you're having technical difficulties, the best thing to do is hop off, log back on, and then if you're still having technical difficulties and you want to ask a question, then please type it in the chat. Okay, so let me go to the presentation. Okay, so this recording will be posted on our electric school bus webpage. If you haven't visited, please do so. There's information from last week's webinar and the call-in information for next week's webinar, as well as the solicitation. So here is the information for this week's webinar. You'll see that we have the slides there already. And then next week, here's the information for our webinar, the call-in information. We have a bunch of information on our website, the solicitation overview, the fact sheet, and then the application portal where you will submit your application. We have a lot of resources on our website. I just want to call your attention to a few. There are some great links for technical assistance. So visit the website and click on those links. We also have a link to the Commercial Clean Federal Tax Credit. Claire will go over that during the presentation. We also have this great resource that the utilities provided to us. So it's some contact information, email addresses that you can type your some questions to, and some tips on how to get started. And then last, we have the address for you to send in questions. Okay, so I want to get started. We only have an hour that we initially slated for this webinar. Sorry. Yeah, so we just have an hour. I will stay after the hour mark should anybody have any questions. But let's get started. We have I have two of my colleagues from DEP who will be joining us today. Our presenters will be Claire Suihara and Ann Arnold. Claire is a senior transportation policy advisor here at DEP. She develops and supports DEP's transportation decarbonization goals. I'm just trying to close this, sorry. Let me go back, I'm sorry. So Claire develops and supports DEP's transportation decarbonization programs across the light, medium, and heavy duty vehicle sectors, with particular focus on zero emission vehicles. Her recent projects included developing this school bus solicitation, a fleet technical assistance program, and the medium and heavy duty vehicle roadmap. Ann Arnold will follow Claire for the presentation. Ann is a longtime DEP employee with over 33 years experience working in the transportation sector. She oversees the Bureau's diesel modernization program, which utilizes state and federal funding to incentivize fleet turnover to the newest and cleanest technology. She also assists with the e-mobility grant program, which brings equitable shared transportation using electric vehicles to low and moderate income communities um, disproportionately impacted by air pollution, and also works on several of the programs affecting our legacy vehicles. So I'm going to turn it over to Claire, and we'll get started with our overview of the solicitation.
Great. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As Melissa said, I'm going to provide an overview of the electric school bus grant program, which we just launched. And then my colleague Ann will give an overview of the application process. And then we'll finish with Q&A. And then just to reiterate what Melissa just said, this is the second in a 3-webinar series for our electric school bus grant program. The first webinar was last Thursday, and the recording is on our website in case you missed it. And then we'll also be having our third webinar next week, giving a deeper dive into the bidirectional charging pilot. So I'm going to cover it very briefly today, but if you are interested in applying for that pilot, you should make sure to tune into that for more information and more details. Okay, so taking a look at our school bus program. As a bit of background, this program comes out of the 2022 school bus law, which called on the Department of Environmental Protection to develop a program to replace diesel school buses with battery electric school buses. The program provides $15 million per year for 3 years. And this, of course, is the first year of the program that we're talking about today. Eligible applicants include schools and school districts who can apply directly to the program, but also school bus contractors that provide student transportation services for New Jersey schools. School bus contractors must apply in conjunction with a specified school district. So that way we can make sure that they're operating in New Jersey and qualify them for overburdened or not. This slide shows a bit more detail about the types of buses that are eligible for funding. So they must be new, all electric, and type C or D buses. For this round of funding, we are not allowing repowered, used, or smaller type A or B buses to qualify for funding. But I just want to note that if you are interested in applying for funding for type A or B buses, we encourage you to take a look at DEP's Diesel Fleet Modernization Program or reach out to us about different opportunities. But for this program, it's just type C or D. And for this program, we're allowing both purchased and leased buses to receive funding, as long as they're able to meet our requirements for the buses to remain operating in the state for 5 years. The buses must have at least 90 miles of range on a full charge, or 30% more range than the expected daily maximum mileage that the route it will serve has, whichever of those is greater. And this is really just to make sure that the buses are going to be able to meet your operational requirements under different conditions. So if it's hot, you need to cool the bus, or if it's cold, you need to heat the bus. We want to make sure that it's able to serve those needs. And then finally, we require that when you receive the buses, the dealer or manufacturer must provide your maintenance personnel, bus drivers, and any other relevant employees with training so that we can make sure that the buses are remaining up and operational as much as possible after you receive them. Okay, applicants can apply for between 2 and 24 buses under this program. This includes a maximum of 16 buses under the base school bus program that I'm talking about right now, plus a maximum of 8 buses under the bidirectional charging pilot. So for a total of 24 buses, but in 2 sort of separate buckets. The maximum amount of funding per bus and associated charging infrastructure varies depending on whether the district is classified as overburdened or not, and the type of charging infrastructure that is being requested. So compared to the base, which is a level 2 charging station, applicants for a DC fast charging station will receive up to $20,000 more, and applicants for the bidirectional charging pilot are eligible for up to $50,000 more. These grant amounts are intended to cover the incremental cost between a diesel school bus and an electric school bus, plus the charging station. And we're planning to award at least 50% of the buses funded under the program to overburdened school districts. And also we're trying to make sure that the awards are spread throughout the state geographically. The grant amounts I showed in the previous slide, just quickly noting that they can be combined with the federal tax credits for electric school buses, which are worth up to $40,000 per bus. And a new feature of the tax credits from previous tax credits that are offered for electric vehicles is that tax-exempt organizations are eligible to apply for the tax credit, and they'll receive it as a direct payment. So we encourage you to check out the details of this on the IRS website, which is linked here, and also in the solicitation for complete details about that. Okay, just a quick note here that you're not required to decommission a bus in order to receive a grant. But if you do choose to decommission a bus, then you'll be awarded additional points in the scoring process, so you could have a higher chance of being funded. And we'll take a closer look at the scoring criteria in a few slides, but basically, the applicant will receive full points in the scrappage category if they decommission a 2010 or older diesel-powered school bus, and half points if they decommission a 2011 or newer diesel-powered school bus. Applicants who choose to decommission an existing bus will have 6 months from the time the new electric school bus is delivered to scrap the older diesel bus. And that's really just intended to give the applicant some flexibility to get the new buses up and running smoothly and figure out how they work. Taking a closer look at the charging infrastructure side, we'll note that applicants are not required to apply for charging infrastructure for their buses, but you do have to indicate how you plan to charge the vehicles so that we can make sure that you can actually operate the vehicles once you receive them. For applications for level 2 charging station, the infrastructure must be Energy Star certified. That's a statewide requirement, but this requirement does not apply to DC fast charging stations. Charging stations can be purchased or otherwise subsidized by any, cannot be purchased or otherwise subsidized by any state or federal funding programs. It cannot exceed the total cost of the infrastructure. So as with the buses, the charging stations must remain operational in New Jersey for at least 5 years. So you need to consider how you're planning to maintain and repair the infrastructure once it's in place. So making sure that you can keep it up and running for that full 5 years to support your buses. And then just a few miscellaneous requirements here. For all buses that are awarded grants, DEP will require telematics devices to be installed to ensure that we're meeting our programmatic requirements, like remaining operational for 5 years, operating in overburdened communities, if that's the category you applied under, and to gauge any operational issues that may arise when you're running the buses. We'll also be meeting with grantees twice per year to touch base on any issues that you're having with the vehicles or any successes, really just to gauge progress and how the buses are working out for you. And then again, just a quick note on other funding sources. We know there's a few different programs for electric school buses right now. So buses and infrastructure that are funded under this program are eligible to be stacked with the federal tax credits and any utility make-ready incentive programs. But the buses and infrastructure cannot be funded with other state and federal funding programs like EPA's Clean School Bus Program or DEP's It Pays to Plug In program for charging stations. If you've already applied to one of these programs, like the Clean School Bus Program, you can still apply to this program. You'll just need to verify that you're either applying for additional buses under this program or that you plan to withdraw from one of the programs if you're awarded the other program. This way we can free up that funding for additional applicants. So just making sure that the funding is not for the same buses. Okay, here's the scoring criteria that we'll use to evaluate the applications. You can see that the highest number of points are rewarded for the project readiness category. And this looks at the routes that you plan to operate the buses on, how the buses will be charged, whether the buses will have sufficient range, and things like that to help us ensure that once you get the buses, again, they're going to be able to actually serve your needs. Okay, we also require applicants to submit a load change form to their utilities, indicating their intent to acquire electric school buses. These don't have to give, the utilities don't have to provide any sort of approval at this stage, but we do need to see that you've told them that you plan to acquire an electric school bus, just so that they can start to prepare, know that it's coming down the pipeline, and get started there. And then, as I talked about in my previous slide, we need to know whether you intend to decommission any buses and whether the school or school district on the application is considered overburdened or not. And those two are really just yes or no criteria. There's no large written portion there. For the project timeline, we're really just looking for information on when you would plan to order the buses and charging infrastructure, install the charging infrastructure, and acquire the buses. So this lets us just make sure that you have a realistic timeline of when the milestones should happen. So making sure that applicants are aware that if you order the buses now, if you're applying for this program now and you order them right when you get awarded, this buses are not going to be delivered and ready for operation next fall. It's really going to be the following school year that they'll be up and running. So we just wanted to make sure that applicants are aware of that. And then finally, we need a proposed budget detailing the cost to purchase the buses and charging infrastructure. So applicants should show that sufficient funding is available to cover any additional costs beyond the maximum funding amount of the program. So if it costs more than what we have in that chart, we need to show that you have funding for it. Okay, so that was the overview of the base school bus program. And then I just have a few quick overview slides of the bidirectional charging pilot. And then, as I mentioned, I'll turn it over to Anne to talk about the actual application process. So the bidirectional charging pilot is an optional component of this program. Any applicants who are interested in applying for the pilot are encouraged to apply. It won't hurt your chances of being selected for the base school bus program, since you can still receive regular school bus grants if you're not selected for this pilot. As a bit of background, under traditional charging, the electric vehicle charging station provides power from the electric grid to the charging station and then to the bus. Under bidirectional charging, the charging station still has that flow of power, but it now also provides power from the bus to something else, like your school building. Now in New Jersey, our utilities aren't currently set up to allow us to sell power back to the grid. So you'll notice that the little arrows stop at the school building itself. So we're looking more at a vehicle to building type operation for this pilot. Bidirectional charging has some resiliency benefits by keeping buildings up and running during blackouts. It can also provide financial benefits by lowering the electricity costs from charging the vehicles. So if you are interested in applying for the pilot, we know that the infrastructure does cost a bit more. So that's why we're funding up to $320,000 or $350,000, which is $50,000 more than the level 2 base charging infrastructure amount. And then just quickly, the application process for bidirectional is a bit more involved than the standard application. So we are requiring applicants to submit commitment letters from a bus manufacturer, a charging station vendor, and a bidirectional charging management software vendor. In some cases, vendors will cover multiple of those categories, but we need to see that you've talked with people who can provide all 3 of those services. We also need to know information about the buildings at the bus depots, since we would be using the buildings to offset the building's electricity demand. We also require more in-depth narrative about how you plan to use those bidirectional capabilities, making sure that you understand things like we would like the buses to be bidirectionally flowing in the evening hours and things like that. And there's more details in the solicitation about that. And there are some additional requirements for usage and additional details for the pilot program. So again, if you are interested in applying, I highly recommend you attend our bidirectional charging program webinar next Wednesday, where we'll go over all the details of the program, answer any questions you have about that specific piece. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Anne to walk us through the application process.
Thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Arnold, and I oversee the Bureau of Mobile Sources Diesel Modernization Program. I'm happy to be here today to give you an overview of the application for applying for the New Jersey Electric School Bus Grant Program. Next slide, please. So the first thing is, how do I submit an application? So we have an application portal, which the link is right there on the left-hand side of the slide. If you prefer, you can use the QR code on the other side. Just put your cell phone camera to scan that and go to the web page. It'll just take you to that same link. This PowerPoint is meant to be used as a guide, and it's helpful if you have it with you when you're filling out the application. We're going to be posting these slides as a separate document on our website, so look for that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first 2 pages of the application are just reading through some things. We just include a brief summary of the solicitation, and we highlight some of the main points. So I like to focus on the 3rd page, which is the acknowledgement page. You'll first see a warning about incomplete applications. The SurveyMonkey platform that we use for this application does not allow you to save your progress so that you can exit it and then come back later. So once you start answering questions, if you do happen to stop partially through and close the web page because you're missing something that's needed for upload, the system will record an incomplete application that we're going to see on our end. So we're going to be deleting any incomplete applications, and they won't be considered for award. So to avoid submitting an incomplete application, please don't start the application until you know that you have all of the required information and uploads ready and in front of you. We've included 7 checkboxes on the acknowledgements page that describe the info that is needed. You'll also want to note that all the questions that require an answer have an asterisk. Next slide, please. The next 3 pages of the application will ask for applicant information, how many electric school buses and DC fast chargers you're applying for, and specific information on buses to be decommissioned if you are decommissioning buses. If you're applying for the optional bidirectional pilot, do not include that information here. The questions pertaining to the bidirectional charging pilot begin in section E, which is further along in the application. I'll also note here that decommissioning is optional. So for that question, you can choose 0 and skip the rest of that section. But if you are decommissioning, we ask for specific information on each bus so that we can calculate the emissions benefits of your project. Only fill in the number of questions that correspond to the number of buses you are decommissioning. It'll ask for the weight class, the engine model year, the vehicle miles traveled per year, the gallons of fuel per year, and the idling hours per year. Next slide, please. The next page of the application is section D, additional project information. This is where you'll be able to upload the required documents. Several file formats are acceptable. I listed them there on the slide. We ask that you name all of your files with your district name followed by the corresponding topic of the document. The example at the bottom says Lacey Township _ project readiness. It would just follow along with those topics. In some cases, you might have several documents that when you combine them, they would encompass one topic. For instance, for project readiness, maybe you have a map showing bus routes as well as a narrative on your charging plan, along with any other documents, letters, emails, etc. So in those cases, we ask that you just scan and combine all associated documents into one file ahead of time, as the application only allows for one upload per topic. When uploading files, you can drag and drop them or navigate to a folder on your computer. You'll also have the option to replace the file if you upload something and you realize it wasn't the right one. Next slide, please. The last section of the application pertains to the bidirectional charging pilot. This pilot is optional. If you are not applying for the pilot, you'll indicate no, and then you'll skip to the end to submit your application. If you're choosing to apply, you must indicate how many buses from 2 to 8. These would be in addition to any buses you are applying for under the non-pilot section of the application. You may also want to decommission additional buses, but again, that is not required. If you are taking part in the bidirectional pilot, the additional file uploads that are required here are different than those that were previously submitted in Section D. They are specific for the buses that are part of the bidirectional charging pilot. The file formats and file upload process are the same as what I discussed for Section D. And for the file naming convention, we ask that you begin with your district name, followed by the corresponding topic of the document, and then followed by the letters BD for bidirectional. Next slide, please. Not all bidirectional charging pilot applications will be awarded. Therefore, the final questions of the application will allow you to modify the total number of buses and charging stations you would like to apply for. For instance, if you applied for 2 electric school buses in Section B for the non-pilot portion, and then an additional 2 for the bidirectional pilot, but if your application is not awarded for the pilot, you may still want to apply for just 2 under the non-pilot portion, or maybe you want to increase that number to 4. The same goes for the DC fast charger stations. We're just giving you that option at the end in case you want to change anything around if you're not awarded. I'll also note here that at any point in the application, you may hit the previous button. There's a button that says previous at the bottom of each page, so you can return to prior pages if you need to review or change any of your answers before submitting the application. Next slide. So what happens next? Your application is not submitted until you click the Done button at the very end. Once it's submitted, you'll see a screen, a thank you screen will appear. That just has a little bit of information with our email address again, if you have any questions. And it also notes that all applicants will be notified of your application status by the end of June 2024. Next page. This final slide just contains the link to our website where the solicitation document and application portal are located. There's also several other resources that are available if you like additional information on these types of projects, as Melissa had noted at the beginning of the presentation. On that note, I'd like to thank you all for attending our webinar today, and I'm going to pass it back to Melissa for the question and answer portion. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire and Ann. Okay, good. So we have at least a half an hour for questions. There's a few questions that came through the chat, so let me go through them first before I start going through and looking for hands that are being raised. So there was a question about, the eligibility of the buses. So electric school buses working, operating at public schools or private schools, are all eligible for this program. I know I had received a couple emails, prior to the webinar about our school buses, that are not in overburdened communities eligible, and the answer is yes. The electric school bus law does say at least half of the awards, will go to communities that are overburdened. So we are providing awards for non-overburdened communities. The funding just is a little bit different, but all schools are eligible regardless of what type of community they operate in. There was a question about telematic devices. So telematic devices, they're small devices that get plugged into the vehicle, to the bus's computer system. It provides real-time data on how the bus is operating. We're interested in the battery health. Are the buses getting the range that they say that they're supposed to? How are the vehicles charging? And are the vehicles being used and how are they being used? So that's the information we're looking for. Again, this is a pilot program, so it's an opportunity for us to gain a lot of information from these buses. The telematics devices will be provided by DEP, so that's not a cost. That will be something that you'll have to be concerned about. Once the vehicles get delivered, you will work with your project manager and they will come out and they will install the telematic devices on the buses.
Thank you, Melissa.
Sure. There was a question about decommissioning. So decommissioning is not required for this program. There are additional points that you can obtain by decommissioning vehicles. So what does that mean? So that means the vehicles cannot be older than 20 years. You get full points for buses that are model year 2010 and older, half points for buses that are model year 2011 and newer. So what we consider decommission, that means drilling a 3 by 3 inch hole in the engine block, disabling the chassis on both sides, so cutting right through the frame or the rail, providing us photographic evidence, whether it's pictures or a video of those things, as well as pictures of like the vehicle plate that show the serial number, the model number, the engine family name, and all of that gets sent to us. So that's, in a nutshell, what decommissioning means. And then let me see, let me go to a few hands. All right, so I see Joe, you have a question, so you can unmute and ask.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Actually, I know you said last time that this wasn't the venue for vendors, if I'm not mistaken, correct? That we should be going through, I guess, the NJSCBA, the Contractors Board Association, is that correct? Bus Association, is that correct?
Right, so for vendors, you can work with any district that you want. We don't have any authorized
Right.
vendors or providers.
So I should present my questions to them?
If you're looking to get onto a cooperative agreement, that's something you would work with that.
I'm concerned about the life safety stuff on the new electronic vehicles, the buses. So like fire, any kind of fire suppression, any kind of ADA restrictions, yeah.
Yeah, so
all of
those are
that kind of stuff.
So those are questions that you should speak to the different manufacturers.
Okay.
Bus
That's my boss
manufacturers.
right there. I think he's on now. I saw Toby. So through the manufacturer, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, let me see. Jenny, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I've got a couple also. With the training you mentioned that's required, who typically does that? Is that the vendor or the training for the bus drivers that you mentioned?
So that could differ depending on who you select for the bus, for the types of bus. So we've heard that it's the dealers, or it could be the manufacturer of the bus.
Okay, so it's something to coordinate when you purchase. And then the other question regarding telematics, I know you explained what it is, but can you clarify, is that something we request as we purchase a bus? Like, is it coming from the same vendor or is it a different vendor? And do you have a sense of the costs?
The telematics devices will be provided by us, by DEP. So that's
Oh, they
not
are by
something
you.
that, yeah. We are hearing, you know, a lot of the buses are coming with telematics automatically. We also would like to put on our own just to obtain, you know, we're looking at different information than the manufacturer, but that's not a cost that is something that you would have to absorb or you have to worry about.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Let's see. Haley? You have a
Hi,
question?
yeah, I have a couple questions. So are you separating the allocation between the bus funds and the infrastructure costs, or is that up to the applicant to allocate the funding towards each cost?
So the way that we structured the funding, if so if you're an overburdened community, it's 300,000. That includes a level 2 charging station. If you are interested in getting a fast charger instead of a level 2 charging station, then you would get 320,000. So we don't split it out by how much is a charger, how much is the school bus. So the reason why, you know, we had designed the program with a flat incentive amount is because we had learned from previous grant programs, you know, how to streamline the process. It took a really long time, and it was, you know, there was a lot of back and forth with getting different price quotes from manufacturers, and you know, there was price changes and costs of charging stations. So the funding amounts are pretty much based on the incremental cost between a new electric bus and a new diesel bus, and then we include the cost of the charging station.
Okay, so it's up to the applicant to separate those funds as they want.
Right. So when you're applying, you need to think about how many buses you're interested in purchasing. And if you were looking for fast chargers, that's something that you would have to note on the application. And then also whether you are in an overburdened community or not. And then if you want to take part in the bidirectional pilot.
Yeah, my question is more so like if someone wanted to completely cover the cost of infrastructure versus only a portion of it with the funding. So I think you've answered that part of it. My next question was, do you guys have a list of approved scrapyards if you're decommissioning buses, or is that also up to the applicant to find a scrapyard?
Right. That's up to the applicant.
Okay, great. And then are third party representatives allowed to apply on behalf of the school district, or does the school district need to be the primary applicant?
So are you a school bus contractor?
We're an EVSE supplier.
So we do our agreements with the whoever's owning the bus.
Okay,
Because
so they'd need to complete the application.
Right, because they have that obligation of having the buses operating, you know, for 5 years. And so that's where the responsibility lies.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
SAGM.
Let me see, Sean Moen?
Thanks, Melissa. And by the way, thanks to everybody at DEP. This is a great session, just like the one last week. Quick question. How does DEP feel about collaboration? So let's say multiple municipalities partnering on a submission. What we're trying to do is encourage things like the sharing of infrastructure where possible, like charging stations, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's fine. You know, to apply like that, we'd have to, we'd want to know obviously where the charging stations are and, who's owning the buses and all of that, but that's fine.
Great, thank you.
Let's see, Thomas?
Question is, so you guys are covering the cost of the charging station. In the last meeting we were in, the school district, I think it was the superintendent that was here, showed us a picture of his fleet of chargers, but would also look to be like a giant transformer unit, like that thing right there. Is that part of the grant to have that installed? No, so that's something that the districts or contractors have to do on their own, because it's 480 amp system with 3-phase power. Not something you would normally see in a building. So it's not just the charging unit, it's that transformer for the power.
Right. So there's a lot of decisions based on how much power is already at the site, what type of charging stations you're looking at using, whether it's a level 2 or fast chargers, how many. There's a lot of decisions that go into how much of that make ready infrastructure has to be part of this project. So basically, we're looking at the charging station and we're looking at the bus. Anything that's from the meter, before the meter, that's all utility infrastructure, and we don't cover that.
So we're all here talking about the infrastructure for the charging unit, but I don't know if everybody knows about this thing. So what is all of the equipment needed to install a charging unit to run the power from your building to the charging unit? And the other question is, as my friend Al Mayro over there asked, there's a huge difference between a level 2 and a fast charger. And just like your cell phone, you keep your cell phone on a fast charger, it's going to degrade the battery. So how much degrading are we talking about if you go with a fast charger over a level 2?
Jetzt WhatsApp. Lent is wie verstanden damit is sehr
I can't hear.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah. So I think, again, every project is going to be different, depending on how many school buses you're looking to electrify, the type of chargers that you're looking to install. When we say fast chargers, it's very different than the fast chargers that you would see for a light duty vehicle. If I go to the mall and I want to charge my vehicle, there's 150 kilowatts or 350 kilowatt chargers. The type of chargers, fast chargers that you would be looking at for a school bus is, I think the most that we've seen is 60 kilowatts. So you're looking at a different, scale of fast chargers. And again, those are all different things that you need to consider when you're evaluating your project. What's your long-term plan of how many vehicles you want to electrify moving forward? And that's where having a conversation with your utility, looking at some of the resources that we have on our website for the entities that provide technical assistance. They can help you with questions like that as it pertains to your own particular fleet.
Yeah, I mean, it just, how much degrading is a fast charging system going to use? Because some districts, if you're only getting 100 miles per bus, and I mean, I have buses out right now in Sussex County. I'm in Essex County. They did a morning run, went out to Sussex, coming back, and then they have to do an afternoon run, and then they have to do athletics. So if they came back for an hour and they did this a couple times a week, am I really going to be hurting the battery life by using a fast charger a lot?
So what I could say is, on the light duty side, we're not seeing that, the battery is degrading that quick. Again, this is a pilot. We're looking to learn about the technology out there. But again, the fast chargers that are being used for buses are not like the super high powered chargers that like people would be using for a light duty vehicle. And again, these are great questions. And you know,
How long is the charge on level 2? How long is the charge on level 2, roughly?
I believe
From
it's
0 to
6 hours. In the presentation last week, there was that information where there was a comparison between a level 2 and then different level fast chargers.
I can answer
Yeah,
that.
you had a
I
chart.
can answer
You
that.
had a chart up there last week. I remember.
Right.
I'll have to go back and look at that. Thanks, Joe.
And again, like I said, World Resources Institute has, we have that link on our website that they have technical assistance hours. You can call and you could book a 30-minute session and speak to them about your particular fleet, and they, you know, can help you run through some of the scenarios. So, you know, my advice is, you know, that's free help for somebody to look at your fleet and help you and guide you moving forward. Venus? You can unmute.
This is very interesting, and apologies for tuning in just a bit late, but I just wanted to get back to eligibility to confirm this. We are a nonprofit in Middlesex County. We operate a school, and we have 2 buses that are used for class trips. We do not pick up students at the home. They're used for class trips. And I don't know if we would be eligible to apply to this program.
What size are the buses?
They're small buses. They are all, because 90% of our students are using mobility devices. So I think there's probably capacity of 6 wheelchairs in a bus.
So those buses would not be eligible under this program, but we do have other funding.
Okay.
So I would advise you to send your question through the Stop the Soot email. And then we can get back to you and share with you the other funding and give you an application for you to submit under the a different program.
I appreciate that. And where would I send that? Where would I send that question to? What?
We could put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Gabby, for putting that into the chat. Any other questions? I see Venus still has your hand up, or Thomas. Thinking those are leftover. Hands up. Let me
Sorry
switch
about
back.
that.
That's okay. Let me switch back over to the chat. Let me see. I see that people are answering questions as we go. Looks like people are chiming in and answering questions in the chat, so thank you. Frank, the question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I have a question about the bi-directional charging. Unless I'm misunderstanding, basically you charge the bus, and then at the end of the day, when you plug the bus in, is it using the electricity that's left in the battery to charge to go to your school to be used in the school instead of it coming from the grid? Is that what that is?
Right. That's what, you know, that's you know, the purpose of it. School buses are, you know, a great option in the summer when the schools aren't really operating. You know, you have this stored energy on the buses. So it's intended to send the power back to the school to use that power instead of pulling from the grid. And it will decrease the peak load on the building and therefore, you know, decrease your electric bill.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? James Edwards? Let me unmute you, James.
Sorry about that. I couldn't figure out how to unmute. I
That's
put the
okay.
question. I put the question in the chat. Not sure if somebody answered it because the chat's moving pretty quickly now. How do we know if we're an overburdened community? Is there a list somewhere that tells us that?
Yeah.
I'm not
So
sure.
in the solicitation, there is a link to the overburdened communities. I think there's about 343 overburdened communities in the state. So you will see that in the actual solicitation document on the website.
Thank you.
You could also, Google New Jersey overburdened communities and you'll be brought
Yep.
to the webpage.
The links are also in the application itself. The link for the overburdened community webpage and the list of overburdened communities it downloads as an Excel spreadsheet.
Jenny, do you have another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up to that question. Our town has 3 different overburdened communities throughout our town. So what is it where the bus parks? Is it routing to the schools that are in one? Is it, what's the determination for that? Or does it have to be a whole municipality is considered one?
So are you talking about you have different census blocks within your community that are considered overburdened?
Correct.
So the
Correct.
way that we look at it as long as there's a census block within a community, we consider that an overburdened community.
Okay, got it.
So if your
Thank you.
community is listed in that list of overburden, you would be eligible for the overburden community incentive amount.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let me see, Chloe.
So I was wondering, once a vehicle is delivered to the applicant, how long do they have to deploy that vehicle in operation?
I'm sorry, I missed a little bit about.
How long do they have to deploy that vehicle once it's delivered to their site?
This is where I need the help of the grant managers. I don't remember the exact time from once the vehicles are delivered that we need the final paperwork. I mean, obviously, the infrastructure needs to be up and working for you to be able to use the buses effectively. I would have to get back to you
Okay.
on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think I did see a question in the chat about payments, and we can give advance payments for the program. This is a reimbursement program, but we can provide some upfront funds, for infrastructure costs or for, deposits for the school buses. So that's something you would work with your grant manager. You would indicate that you would be looking for advance funding. Joe?
Yeah, Melissa, I see in the chat, there's somebody that mentioned thermal runaway, gas detection, life safety stuff. I know that company, Seaboard Fire and Safety, but I know we talked about this before, but along that lines, we go directly to the manufacturers of the buses, correct? As a vendor, not the DEP. You guys
Correct.
oversee it, the new buses, but you don't deal with that. We have to go
Correct.
directly to the manufacturers of the buses and whatnot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Chloe, do you have another question or your hand, is it still raised?
No, sorry, I'll unraise.
It's okay. Don't see any more hands raised. Let me switch back over to the chat. We don't include planning costs as part of the project. We'll cover the school bus, the charging station. There's another question that I see, so this program is for funding for the electric school bus and the charging station, if the charging station is needed, but you cannot apply for just the charging station. If you're interested in just applying for the electric school bus because you already have chargers, that's fine. We will just need you to indicate that in your application and provide us the details of the types of charging stations that you have. Any other questions? I'm just trying to scroll through to see what has answers and what doesn't. Chloe, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So are manufacturers required to submit eligibility applications as well?
Manufacturers?
Yeah, of the vehicles, are they required to be eligible under this program? Sometimes school bus grant programs require vendors to submit eligibility applications.
No.
Okay.
I see a question about a professional route analysis as a requirement for the project. Yes, that's, to show us that, this is a shovel-ready project. You've thought about your buses, you've thought about your routes, you've laid out, you thought about what kind of charging would be needed as part of your project. We want to ensure that everything that we're funding is successful and that, if you have a really, if your routes have a lot of miles that, perhaps a fast charger is a better option to ensure that you're ready for the afternoon routes or sports and things like that. So that's why we're looking for that route analysis. Again, and, in that too, we want to ensure that you're factoring in, the really hot temperatures or the cold temperatures that will affect range. So all of those things, we want to make sure people are considering when they're putting out their application. Again, we just want to ensure that the buses that we're funding are successful and they're well thought out. Joe, is your hand up again?
Yes, I was just ready to type it in. My last question, what about necessary upgrades and maintenance as the EV buses are used? Does that pertain to you, or once again, go back to who's ever using them, I guess?
So there are maintenance contracts and warranties with the buses.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, all of that could be included in, what we cover for the bus. But again, the maximum is, that incentive amount that we have in the table.
Okay. Thank you.
So we are at the top of the hour. It's 1 o'clock. If you have any more questions, feel free to raise your hands and we can keep going and answering questions. Or you can submit them in the chat, or you can submit them through our Stop the Soot email. We will be posting the questions that come in through the email. We'll be answering them and posting them at the end of the week for everybody to view. The application portal is open today, but I suspect you're going to need some time to go through the solicitation, gather more information, reach out to us for, answers. Also reach out to, the different entities that provide technical assistance. And I guess, join us next week for our third webinar that will talk about the bidirectional charging pilot. That one, to me, is an exciting pilot for us to work on. I'm sure there's lots of questions for those of you who are interested in it. But I don't see any more.
So we can
hands
bring
raised.
questions next week too, the 14th. Is that okay?
If you have general questions about the solicitation, it would be best to send it through the email.
Okay.
I'd like to, focus that webinar on the bidirectional charging pilot, as there might be very detailed questions.
Gotcha.
But yeah, send your questions through the email. We'll answer them.
That's
We'll post them.
Valentine's Day, isn't it?
That's because we love this program. We're very excited. Well, thank you everybody for attending. I'm very excited that we've had such high participation. I'm hoping that we get a lot of applications, and we look forward to working with all of you. So thank you again.